Welcome to day 4 of Tzeentch Week, where we're going to be taking a look at Tzaangors. Essentially what a Tzaangor is a Tzeentch-themed beastman, or Brayherd I suppose you would say in Age of Sigmar. They're somewhat hard to understand because few people ever actually see them, but they have been amassing in greater and greater numbers in kind of the wild areas of the realms. And they really function as Tzeentch's shock troops, or at least the mortal ones. And in this video, we're going to talk about kind of where they come from, the different types of them, and how they fit into the overall Tzeentch army. And as far as their origins go, there's actually a lot of ways for Tzaangor to exist. Some were once men that were warped by a Tzaangor shaman, which we'll get to in a little bit. Some are humans that underwent a terrible ritual, meaning it wasn't done to them, but they did it to themselves. And some are frankly just mutated beast children, abandoned by their parents and found by a Tzeentchian cult. So Tzaangor is really a catch-all term for a few different origins, but what it really is sort of a mutated humanoid imbued with the power of Tzeentch. And as such, all of them, no matter how they are created, recognize Tzeentch as God. They see themselves as being blessed by him. Now, the most obvious comparison to make when we're talking about Tzaangor is those to the Brayherd, particularly to Gors. But Tzaangors are known for being far more intelligent and cunning than their beastman counterparts, and they see Brayherd as savages, whereas the Tzaangors see themselves as more refined and focused. Tzaangors are particularly attuned to magic. They're drawn to arcane sights and objects, and on some level they are able to detect strands of fate. They know when big things are happening on a global perspective. And no matter how intelligent they are or cunning they are, basically their overall job as a basic Tzaangor is to be a line fighter for Tzeentch, because Tzeentch is not known for his melee capabilities. These really are the chaff who go in and fight while the wizards do the rest of the heavy lifting. Now, as the life of a Tzaangor goes, you're going to spend a lot of time just fighting, okay, with the hopes of impressing Tzeentch enough that he would elevate you to a more esteemed position. This kind of seems to be the great game of anyone who works for Chaos. And that elevation takes 3 forms. One is to become an enlightened. These guys act as the generals and leaders of Tzaangors. They wield spears made from change metal, which is a material that we don't know terribly much about, but it sounds cool. Enlightened are interesting because they can perceive echoes of the past. They can tell things that have happened in a space previously and kind of gain from that knowledge. And while in combat, they'll be whispering kind of crazy secrets to themselves, and it drives their opponents absolutely insane. They just hear the whispers reverberating in their heads. Now, the second kind of elevation of a Tzaangor is the Skyfire. Skyfires exclusively ride on discs. That is just the way that they like to do battle. Enlightened actually have a choice. Skyfires do not. It is a compulsion for them. And Skyfires can see potential futures, but they cannot speak of them. So you have this one part of the army that is incredibly fast moving because they have to be on discs, but they are utterly silent about what they can see. And as people who can see the future, their goal is to stand as far back from the action as they can and manipulate the strands of fate at a distance. They do this with their ranged attacks. And the third kind of elevation for a Tzaangor is that of the Tzaangor shaman. And whatever the origin story for a Tzaangor is, these guys were born under a dark omen. They've been gifted with a disc of Tzeentch, and they have the single greatest power in the mind of a Tzaangor, and that is, of course, to make more Tzaangors. And that's actually what their unique spell does on their war scroll. Now, shamans are gifted in prophecy, and they have the ability to make flux cairns. This is similar to the Brayherd and Beastman herd stones. The difference is these really act like a repository of arcane power, much like a battery. And it grows over time, it corrupts the land around it, really changes the realm that it's set in, progressively, almost like a cancer almost in the ground of Tzeentch's kind of chaos power. But it's like a herd stone where the beastmen worship it, but it's something more than that, where he can use these as kind of a nexus of magic power. And being the only type of unit that's able to make more Tzaangors and build these flux cairns, that makes these extremely rare and important in any Tzaangor army. Now, based on that, there's really not a ton of lore about these guys, but there are a lot of things that make them very cool and a very unique part of a Tzeentch army. The first of all being Aligned beastmen are my dream. One of the things, as I'm building these slaves to darkness and I'm looking at the other things that chaos has available, I so wish that there were all different kinds of gore and ungore for different chaos gods. They used to have those things. They used to have, I know the Nurgle one was called Pestigores, and that was a really, really cool thing. But they cleared that out. And so the fact they brought these back makes me really, really happy and excited. They play an interesting kind of counterpart to the Acolytes. The narrative behind the Acolytes, I'm not even going to give them a full video because there's just nothing really there. But they are the refined people in societies who turn to tzeentch, and they become cultists, and when the right moment strikes right, they throw off their disguises and they become the Acolytes as we see them in the models. But the difference is Acolytes come from educated people who fit into society at various levels, whereas the Tzaangors are very, very savage. So they are both kind of the foot soldiers of tzeentch, but they represent two very, very different kinds of faces for tzeentch. Because there's more than one type of magic. Yes, there's the refined, scholarly, pursuit of greater education and arcane might, and then there's this savagery aspect, right? And we see this a lot in Bone Splitters, where yes, magic exists, but they're like the shamanistic, savage side of that, bringing this magic about through the flux cairns, whereas the Acolytes would have repositories and libraries and more sophisticated things. They're a good counterpart that are doing the same thing. I think they have just enough of a hierarchy to be interesting. I wouldn't want Tzaangor to be this like very rigid structure that's, first of all, not very tzeentchy, but second, it's not very wild, right? Having the different elevated statuses based on who tzeentch is really happy with, I think, is a great balance of giving them enough hierarchy to have flavor, but not so much that they lose that kind of wild aspect. Next up is the fact that any kind of chosen mortal for a chosen god is a very, very interesting. Like Bloodbound are interesting in relation to Khorne, so are the Rotbringers with Nurgle and stuff like that. And so this is tzeentch's, and the way he manifests himself between the Acolytes and Tzaangor, that kind of wild, uncontained magic that focuses on just changing things for the sake of change, is excellent because they demonstrate the presence of their god in the realms. And when you're reading the description of these guys, I want to make it clear that the sense of wild savagery is not easily conveyed from me to you, but it's very heavily felt in the actual text itself. And when you're reading this, you kind of feels like you're reading the Bone Splitters book, where everything's so crazy and wild and ludicrous and powerful and awesome that you get you pumped, right? Like, it made me want to go buy some Tzaangor. And that's the best kind of writing for these models that there is. And folks, those are my thoughts on Tzaangors. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow in my last video of Tzeentch Week. Thank you so much. Happy wargaming. Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I want to introduce you to some awesome folks. These are my patrons over on Patreon, and they make this show possible by their direct support of me to buy battle tomes and Black Library books and all the material I need and the hardware support that I need to make this stuff possible. And if you'd like to join them, go ahead and click over to the Patreon page, to the link in the description down below, and you'll be introduced to a really awesome community of people talking about the hobby, sharing what they're painting. I invite them to be part of polls to decide what content comes next. I raffle off every battle tome that I review, and we're having some great fun and discussions over there. So go ahead and check it out. Now, if you can't support in that way, that's completely fine. I'm just so glad that you watched this video here today. And if you have an Age of Sigmar lore question, go ahead and click subscribe and leave it in the comments down below. I read every single question and comment. I respond to as many as I possibly can, but I use them all as inspiration for future videos. So go ahead and do that now. And I look forward to seeing you guys on my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Thank you so much for watching, and happy wargaming.